Pakistan's prime minister says the text is final, and Israeli jets are still hitting Beirut. Those are both happening today. If you're just joining us, U.S.-Iran talks had been running through Gulf mediation while the military exchanges widened. The draft centered on a 60-day ceasefire extension, an end to operations on every front including Lebanon, nuclear commitments, and a Hormuz for port blockade trade-off. The open questions were verification, and whether Israel or allied militias would be bound by any of it.
This is Iran War Daily. Today, Pakistan's PM says the deal's done. Iran is reportedly asking for $300 billion, and nobody quite trusts the Strait of Hormuz yet. We start with who's actually signing.
All week I've been asking who exactly is signing. Today, there's a name on the record. Pakistani PM Shehbaz Sharif says a final, agreed-upon text of the peace deal has been reached. That's the first time a named mediator, not an anonymous regional official, has used that language out loud.
Right, and Doha's been quietly shoved out of the frame. So Islamabad's carrying a finished text now. Fine. Does Pakistan have 1 ounce of leverage over Israeli airstrikes or IRGC compliance that Qatar didn't?
Exactly. That answer creates a new problem. Final agreed text in Islamabad's mouth and finalizing next steps in Washington's may not be describing the same instrument.
And here's what's eating me. The I-24 News rundown puts Iran's demands at 14 points. A $300 billion rehabilitation package, and Iran keeps its missile program. Those aren't footnotes.
Which is why I can't reconcile the sourcing. CBS described a 60-day extension on June 15th. 14 points, including a $300 billion ask and preserved missiles, would mean a much broader deal. One of those accounts is closer to the actual text. I want to know which.
Who writes that $300 billion check? And which U.S. ally signs off on Tehran keeping its missile architecture fully intact? Because that reads like the IRGC vetoing its own disarmament.
And it collides directly with the IAEA. The board voted 21-3, demanding Iran declare its stockpiles. If the agreed text has no inspection timeline and Iran's preserving missiles, that formal demand is now in open tension with whatever was signed. Verification is the unresolved core here, not a footnote.
Then there's Trump. He says this deal saves Israel from nuclear obliteration, and he'll restart attacks if Iran misses the final deadline. That's a public trigger clause.
Name the actor, name the source, and that's the president on the record with a trigger. The question is the benchmark. Who declares a breach, and against what metric?
And does Israel's Beirut campaign count as a violation from Iran's side of the ledger? Because the bombs are dropping on Lebanon, while Tehran's the one expected to behave.
On Lebanon, the gap stopped being theoretical. AP video and the Israeli military's own statement confirm strikes on Beirut's southern suburbs on June 15th. Al Jazeera reports 5 killed and forced displacement orders across 24 towns and villages.
And this is right as they're supposedly finalizing a deal that ends operations on every front, including Lebanon. Israel isn't even a signatory. So the text says one thing, and the ground moves hard the other way.
And those strikes came after the text was reportedly agreed. The MOU, per CBS sourcing, commits to ending operations on every front, including Lebanon. It hasn't held. That's documented now, not just feared.
5 straight episodes I've watched this gap. It's not me being a cynic anymore. It's a pattern with dates on it.
On the straight, today's rundown confirms the MOU explicitly includes lifting the Hormuz blockade. So we're talking about a treaty commitment now, not just a claim.
Sure, but a clause doesn't clear mines. The step back piece has BIMCO warning mines are still a concern, and shippers saying confidence lags even after a signature. So what actually has to happen before a tanker transits?
That's the texture I want today. How fast insurers and oil markets believe the strait is safe, and how fast an ordinary driver feels it at the pump.
Underwriters price fear in days, Governments price relief in press conferences. Watch the insurance premiums, not the photo op. That's when you'll know Hormuz is actually open.
From Matthias Inbar, Ariel Osaran, Yana Suryadnaya at I-24 News.
An agreement between the United States and Iran has been reached, with President Trump, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister all confirming a deal Sunday night. Trump declared the Strait of Hormuz open and announced the immediate lifting of the U.S. naval blockade. "Ships of the world, start your engines. Let the oil flow," he said.
The headline now carries 3 names confirming it: Trump, Pakistan's PM Sharif, and Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, all on the record Sunday night. So yes, the authority question has an answer.
Sure, 3 signatures. Now read the fine print. Iran's 14 points keep the missile program and the proxy networks completely off the table. And somebody's writing a $300 billion rehabilitation check.
And that's where the I-24 rundown collides with the CBS account from yesterday. CBS described a 60-day instrument. 14 points, including U.S. regional withdrawal, points to a much broader deal. I want to know which sourcing is closer to the actual text.
Trump's also dangling a trigger. Restart attacks if Iran misses the final accord. So, name the benchmark. Who declares breach? And does Israel hammering Beirut suburbs the same weekend count against anybody's ledger, or only Iran's?
The mediators say a text exists. Implementation is already contested. Both are true tonight, and they sit pretty uneasily next to each other. NBC News, with Gabe Gutierrez and Matt Bradley.
Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who has been mediating talks, said today that a final, agreed-upon text of the peace deal has been reached, and his country is working to the U.S. and Iran to finalize next steps.
The attribution question I've been pressing all week finally has a specific answer. Pakistani PM Shehbaz Sharif, on the record by name. Quote, "A final, agreed-upon text of the peace deal has been reached." He's the first named head of government to use that language publicly.
Right, so it's Islamabad carrying the finished text now, not Doha doing shuttle runs. Sharif says they're working with Washington and Tehran to, quote, finalize next steps. And that's the phrase that worries me. Final agreed text, but the next steps are still being finalized? You don't finalize the steps after the text is final. Something's still open, and Sharif isn't saying what.
That's the gap I want sourced, because the I-24 rundown we just hit lays out lifting the Hormuz blockade and a ceasefire on every front. But if this same agreed text also carries Iran's 14-point demands, the $300 billion package and the missile program intact, NBC is describing something much narrower than the operative deal.
So which document did Sharif actually finalize? Because those 2 versions can't both be the operative reality.
Associated Press writes,
The Israeli military said it launched strikes on Beirut on Sunday, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure, despite ongoing efforts to negotiate an end to the U.S.-Iran war. Smoke could be seen rising over the Lebanese capital.
AP has video, and the Israeli military's own statement on this. Strikes on Beirut's southern suburbs Sunday, smoke over the capital, Hezbollah infrastructure the stated target. And this comes after the text NBC just described as finalized.
Right, so the ink's supposedly dry on a ceasefire covering every front, including Lebanon, and Israel is putting smoke over Beirut the same weekend. Israel isn't a signatory to any of this, which means the one party with planes over Lebanon never agreed to stop.
And that's the part that's hardened all week. The MOU language covers operations in Lebanon. The Israeli Air Force was over Beirut after the text was reportedly agreed. The commitment and the ground are moving in opposite directions, and we can document both.
5 straight episodes. I've watched the gap between paper and ground get wider, not narrower. Trump's out there saying the deal saves Israel from nuclear obliteration while Israeli jets work the suburbs. Somebody explain to me how Iran reads a strike on Beirut as anything other than a breach from the other side of the ledger.
Al Jazeera is tracking this.
5 dead in South Lebanon, displacement orders slapped on 24 towns and villages. And this is the same day the peace text is supposedly final. The MOU we just walked through says operations end on every front, with Lebanon named specifically.
Both are confirmed. AP video on the Beirut suburbs, Al Jazeera on the 5 killed and the displacement orders across those 24 towns. And these strikes landed after the text was reportedly agreed. Israel isn't a signatory to the thing Sharif says is final. So the commitment to end operations in Lebanon is binding on whom exactly? Because on the ground, it's binding on no one.
Right. The paper says every front, including Lebanon. The Israeli military says, leave your homes immediately. Those two sentences are dated the same week, and only one of them moved any people. Okay, so a deal gets signed. Iran says the strait is open. Why wouldn't ships just go?
Because signing a deal doesn't make the waterway safe. The shipping industry's first problem is physical. The global trade group BIMCO warned just this week that Hormuz remains high risk and that mines are a major concern, and you can't sail a supertanker through a minefield on good faith alone. Per Reuters reporting, shippers in Asia and Europe said confidence could take weeks to rebuild, and navigation will only restart once safety is actually assured, not just promised. For oil volumes, analysts at the trade data firm Kepler estimate ship traffic could climb back to roughly 50% of pre-war levels within 30 days if the deal is implemented without major setbacks. And there are an estimated 118 tankers already stuck inside the Persian Gulf that could start exiting within 15 days. But 50% of pre-war flow still leaves global markets well below normal, because before the war the strait carried about 1/4 of the world's seaborne energy, plus fertilizer and food imports for the entire Gulf region, according to Crisis Group. Then there's insurance. War risk premiums have to come down before most commercial operators will commit their vessels, and underwriters typically want weeks of incident-free transits before they re-rate a corridor.
So even if oil starts moving again in weeks, does that mean pump prices come down on the same timeline?
Not quite. Oil markets are already pricing in the deal's possibility, which is why crude dropped Monday on the news. But full relief at the gas station lags by weeks, while cheaper crude works its way through refining and distribution. So watch the insurers. If war risk premiums don't actually fall, or if those 118 stranded tankers don't clear the strait without incident, the pump price relief stays fragile. And if implementation slips before the expected Friday signing in Switzerland, prices could snap right back up.
If Iran War Daily helps you track fast-moving risk, try Ebola Watch, a daily DRC and Uganda Ebola outbreak briefing, every weekday, with case counts, border tracing, WHO vaccine news, and traveler guidance. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. Next up, Friday, June 19th, is the first marker. Does Tehran begin fulfilling the commitments Iran's deputy foreign minister tied to the release of frozen assets? Then watch the next 15 days for whether the estimated 118 tankers stuck inside the Persian Gulf start clearing Hormuz without incident. And over 30 days, whether ship traffic moves toward Kepler's roughly 50% of pre-war levels if the deal holds. Links to every story we covered today are in the show notes if you want to dig further into any of them. That's Iran War Daily for today. This is a Lantern podcast.